Before we get going, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land in which we meet today, the Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung people, and I'd like to acknowledge elders past, present, and future. I'm absolutely delighted today, as those of you with whom I've already spoken would know, that we've had such a fantastic turnout for this event. The Building 4.0 CRC Annual Showcase is our second largest event in the year. We like to keep a little bit of powder in reserve for the annual conference, which will be happening this year in the middle of September. And no doubt some of you will already have seen some communication around that. I'm also particularly delighted to see the whole ecosystem here. Right? This has been central to our approach in the CRC. I would note that we have researchers here. We have people and our friends from the skills and training and vocational education area here. We have our commercial industry partners here. We have peak industry bodies here. And we have a few people from government as well here in the room. And that's what CRCs are all about. And that is the particular and unique value proposition of this CRC in particular. The kind of internal theme that we had for the showcase this year is really impact on industry. As everyone knows, the CRC is industry-led. It's about identifying industry problems and working on the best solutions to them. But I think this is also an indication of where we're at in the CRC and together in this group in our innovation journey. By the end of this year, and I often get the numbers wrong, so Sam and Chris, please punish me later. But I think by the end of this year, we'll have somewhere between 30 and 40 projects complete. So as we get to that level of maturity, we need to start thinking more, I think, about the impact of the research, not just doing the research, but actually what is that impact going to be? And if I can leave you with a question throughout the day on that matter, it's how can we improve this impact and indeed accelerate this impact? That's something that I think we all need to consider. Another sign of this maturity, I think, is the emergence of two new project types in the CRC this year. The lighthouse projects that some of you are involved in, and the special interest projects, which Chris is going to talk about in a second. We are hugely proud of those initiatives, and we're really looking forward and with great anticipation celebrating those projects when they finally not only start, but also finish. I also just wanted to quickly relay before we get going today an experience I had last month. I was fortunate enough to be invited over to Stanford University for one of, I think, one of the best conferences in our field. And I wanted to relay, I guess, a fundamental learning back to this group that I had while I was there. And that is that our group and the research you see on the walls around you today is at world standard, right? There's not some isolated pocket of knowledge or some fountain of wisdom hiding in some other country that we don't know about, and that's miles ahead of what we're doing here in Australia in the CRC. We are at the leading edge. And so I'm hugely proud to stand in front of you and be able to report that. And I think it's also really important because sometimes down here in Australia, we often think that somewhere in some secret outfit in Switzerland or elsewhere, there's something going on that we could never grasp and we could never achieve. That's not the case. We are at the leading edge, and I want everyone to know that. Of course, some of these issues are really at a high level, our achievements, what we intend to do in the future, but today is also very, very simple in many ways. It's about the sharing of knowledge. It's about the networking. It's about the conversations that we'll all have today. I've already had about 5 or 6, so I'm probably going to hit the 50 mark by the end of today, and so I'm really looking forward to that. I also would just want to give a little shout out to one of my favorite parts of our annual showcase, which is something we started last year, and that's these little flyers. I'm a huge fan of these. They basically take a kind of snapshot of what's here. On one side, you have a selection of projects, and on the other side, you have some key information that we like to highlight every year. It's a little different. So I would encourage you to take one of these, use the QR codes to link through to our website. the website is an absolute fountain of wisdom of everything CRC. It contains much more information than you see here today. So I would really encourage you to use it. So that's enough from me. My final act before disappearing until some closing remarks this afternoon is to introduce our extremely capable research director. Chris joined us about a year ago, and I think, as you would all agree, he's really made his presence felt over the last year. It certainly really impressed me in the way that he's approached the role and is leading the projects group in our CRC, and it's Professor Chris Knapp. I'd like to invite Chris up to talk to us about the research roadmap work that he's been doing. Chris, come on up.
Fantastic looking room. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. It's really exciting to see current friends and collaborators, and also a lot of new faces who haven't been to our CRC events before. So welcome. We really appreciate your interest. I just want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered today, and to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. As Matthew mentioned, I'm the research director for Building 4.0. I started about 12 months ago, February last year. It's been a real challenge, but also what I want to say is it's a role that I approach with real humility and a real sense of privilege. And the reason I say that is that because my role, while I help to set strategy and direction, and also to help manage the team that delivers our research, it's really that I take great inspiration from the amazing people that the CRC brings together. It's a really fantastic group of people in our team. I feel very lucky to work with that team, but also the industry partners, the leadership that the industry partners bring is something that I just really want to acknowledge. We can't do it without you. So thank you very much. And that's a really principal part of what today is about, is celebrating the contributions and the outcomes of the industry-led research that we're undertaking. Likewise, the researchers, the academics, the people that are at the coalface, that have the intellectual leadership, the energy, the investment that they put into it, it obviously makes it all possible. So for me to stand back and to watch that, and to have a hand in orchestrating all the terrific work that we're doing, and you'll see the evidence of that today. It's been a real joy to be a part of the CRC to date, and I'm really looking forward to, as Matthew said, what we can do to go from today in terms of building upon what we're doing, achieving even greater success, more innovative, and trying to push the standard of the work that we're doing, and the direction that we're taking. So thank you to not only our industry partners, but also to our colleagues from Monash, University of Melbourne, and from QUT. So Matthew's asked me to provide an update, if you will, and an overview of the research roadmap that we've been developing as part of our, setting our direction. So you would have seen this diagram on our website or at other events that you've maybe attended in the past. It's this kind of diagram that suggests a platform ecosystem that we might all arrive at some point along the journey of the CRC. That includes all these different sort of characteristics of greater sustainability and productivity and the like. So we've crafted a roadmap that sort of emulates that same graphic. You will find this diagram also in the flyer that Matthew just promoted. I guess the one thing I should say firstly is that we have a much more detailed and exhaustive version of this roadmap that really wasn't suitable for this kind of forum. It includes finances and other kinds of quantitative targets and so on. So really what this is meant to do is just give a very quick snapshot, and for the purposes of speaking to you all today in terms of where we think we are right now, where we're headed, and the aspirations that the CRC is focused upon. So there's kind of 4 parallel lanes in this roadmap journey. The light gray is project value and scope. So that's really talking about the kind of traditional research projects that we're doing, and the different kinds of research projects that we're doing, as Matthew just alluded to, and I'll explain a couple of those in a moment. The light green is trying to track our impact and our output. The darker gray is our education, skills, and training sort of path, if you will. And then the darker green is our path towards that 4.0 ecosystem in terms of what that is and what will that look like when we cross the finish line. of the 7 years that this CRC has, well, I guess not really before it. We're not at the beginning. We've got about 4.5 years to go. So just to track a couple of the highlights that are demarcated on here, sort of markers on the road, if you will. We had our first annual conference last year. In the future, we're hoping that another sort of impact or output might be a spin-off company. Is there kind of a new entrepreneurial endeavor that the CRC helps to foster and initiate, or patents that might be generated, other forms of commercialization and utilization of the IP that's generated from our work. With no disrespect to any members of the Australian Building Codes Board, I did very ambitiously note, maybe changes to the National Construction Code that might help to enable the things that we're working on. Again, it's an aspirational diagram. It's not necessarily a promise, but we'll see what we can do to shake things up. Likewise, in the space of the project types and scope, as Mathew mentioned, we're diversifying our projects portfolio to not only do what we would call traditional research projects, which are industry-led and with research collaboration, but also do some bricks and mortar projects that we can really kick the tires, that we can demonstrate in the real world, the application and the utility of the research, or also learn from in situ projects. So we're calling those our lighthouse projects. We hired a lighthouse projects manager, Dr. Dane Miller, in December last year. So we have dedicated staff to help us support the lighthouse project initiative, and I'm very pleased to say that we have our first lighthouse project now up and running, and we'll have the patron of that project speak about it later in the day from Sumitomo Forestry, and we also have 2 other projects that are very, very close out of the gate, and we'll be hearing about one of those a little bit later today as well. So really exciting initiative. The other project type that we're rolling out that Mathew just mentioned is our special interest projects, or SIPs. We saw the need for a project type which is all-encompassing in terms of allowing everybody in our consortium to benefit from the research project. So normally our research projects have a kind of a buy-in from different industry partners. Maybe there's 1, 2, 3 partners, 1, 2, or 3 universities, but they're kind of contained with a set group. The special interest projects are focusing on topics that we deem to be too important for 1 or just a few industry partners or collaborators to have the benefit from. So we want to open those up to everybody in the consortium. The first special interest project that we're rolling out is focused on circular economy, on developing a circular economy roadmap for the construction industry. So industry partners, stay tuned for a bit more information about that, coming from myself and also from our partnerships director, Daniel Rex. And the final bubble that's highlighted on this diagram is also about just trying to get ourselves towards having more holistic, transformative projects. And again, that speaks to that greater degree of ambition and innovation that we are targeting. And as the CRC is maturing and we're really refining our approach to the research and seeing the opportunities, how can we get more and more out of every single project that we do, and we can make the most out of the remaining 4 years that we have. In the education track, and my colleague Ross Digby is going to be speaking a bit more specifically about skills and training initiatives in just a moment in our first panel session. But again, as an example of the kind of impact we would like to make through the CRC is to actually help change the education and training landscape through developing new programs that are inspired by and built upon the research work of our consortium. And then in the kind of the trajectory towards the 4.0 ecosystem, and building on the lighthouse, we would love to be able to, and this, again, this is a big aspiration, but we would love to do a very significant platform, for example, a platform DFMA Forge-like project, if any of you know the Forge in the UK, as a kind of an exemplar of a collaborative built project. So here in Australia, and as Mathew said, we have the capability and the capacity to do things that are of a world standard and level of ambition that we should have no reservations about trying to undertake. So we'll obviously be working towards how we can initiate such a project, which again demonstrates to the industry how we can get to the finish line, which again, the finish line isn't going to be a clear line that we cross. It's going to be when we run out of time and money. But at that point, we want we want to have really felt like we've moved the needle, right? I think that's why we're all here. Everyone's here because we collectively see the need to improve the construction industry and all the players that are involved in that. How can we improve that situation? How can we move on from the antiquated ways of doing things? So I'm preaching to the converted, but again, we have to make that impact, and we have to really, help to demonstrate and lead through the CRC to make that impact felt. So that's where we hope to land in 4.5 years' time.